Hello, and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Before the Fall. Damon Westerly was born from struggle. The son of a steelworker in Pittsburgh, he clawed his way out of poverty through sheer determination and an uncanny ability to see opportunities where others saw nothing. By 45, he had transformed himself into a successful construction company owner with government contracts spanning 3 states. At 30, he met Vanessa during a charity gala. With her ash blonde hair and piercing gray eyes, she had captivated the room. The daughter of a middle-class accountant, Vanessa Crawford had aspirations far beyond her upbringing. She saw in Damon what many women saw: ambition, drive, and the promise of security. Their courtship was brief but intense. 6 months after their first date, they married in a lavish ceremony that became the talk of their social circle. 2 years later, Olivia was born, a beautiful girl with her mother's striking features and, as Damon would later discover, her calculating nature. For 15 years, Damon built an empire while Vanessa crafted the perfect image of a devoted wife and mother. They lived in an elegant, historic home in an exclusive neighborhood, attended the right events, and donated to the right causes. On the surface, they were the epitome of American success. Behind closed doors, cracks had begun forming years earlier. Damon noticed the way Vanessa's eyes would glaze over when he spoke about his business challenges. He saw how she became increasingly obsessed with maintaining appearances, spending exorbitant amounts on designer clothes and luxury vacations. He observed how she molded Olivia in her image, teaching their daughter that image was everything and that people were merely stepping stones to what you wanted. People are assets or obstacles, Liv, he once overheard Vanessa telling their 13-year-old daughter. Learn to use the assets and remove the obstacles. Despite the growing distance, Damon remained devoted to his family. He believed that providing financial security was his primary responsibility. He worked longer hours, took on riskier projects, and pushed himself relentlessly. 6 months before the accident, Damon noticed peculiar changes in his household. Vanessa had begun attending a new fitness class 3 times a week with religious dedication. She bought new lingerie that he never saw her wear. Their already infrequent intimate life dwindled to nothing. Olivia, now 17, grew increasingly distant and disrespectful. Once daddy's little girl, she now regarded him with barely concealed contempt, mimicking her mother's dismissive attitude toward him. "When are you leaving for Chicago?" Vanessa asked one evening, not looking up from her phone. "Tuesday. The lakefront project needs my personal attention," Damon replied, studying his wife's face for any reaction. "How long this time?" 3 days, maybe 4. She nodded absently, still scrolling through her phone. "Olivia, and I might drive up to the lake house while you're gone, for some mother-daughter time." Something in her tone made Damon uneasy. He considered hiring a private investigator, but dismissed the idea. He trusted Vanessa, or at least, he wanted to believe he could. That same night, while searching for a misplaced document, Damon found a crumpled receipt in Vanessa's coat pocket, a weekend stay at a boutique hotel downtown from 3 weeks earlier, when she had supposedly been visiting her sister in Cleveland. The reservation was for 2. 2 days later, he discovered a text message on Olivia's phone that she had inadvertently left on the kitchen counter. "Mom says we need to figure out what to do about Dad. She says Pierce thinks waiting any longer is risky." Damon didn't confront them. Instead, he began quietly investigating. He learned that Pierce Harrington was a private wealth manager at Vanessa's bank, a man 15 years younger than Damon with a reputation for specializing in wealthy female clients. A man who had apparently been managing more than just Vanessa's investment portfolio for the past 8 months. What truly cut Damon was discovering that Olivia not only knew about the affair, but had been actively helping cover for her mother, serving as lookout and alibi. As the Chicago trip approached, Damon realized he needed to make a decision. Divorce seemed inevitable, but he wanted to understand the full scope of the betrayal first. He decided to confront Vanessa after returning from Chicago, once he had figured out how to protect himself legally. What Damon couldn't know was that Chicago would change everything, just not in the way anyone expected. Chapter 2. The Accident. The Lakefront project in Chicago was Damon's most ambitious venture yet, a mixed-use development that would transform a neglected section of industrial waterfront into luxury condominiums, upscale retail, and public green spaces. The project had faced numerous regulatory hurdles, but Damon had finally secured the necessary permits. This trip was meant to finalize details with investors and the construction team. Rain lashed against the windows of the conference room as Damon concluded his presentation to the investment group. Outside, Lake Michigan churned angrily under dark skies. "Gentlemen, I believe we've covered everything," Damon said, collecting his documents. "Construction begins next month." Bradford Klein, the lead investor, extended his hand. "Westerly, you've pulled off a miracle here. Not many could have navigated those zoning issues. That's why you hired me," Damon replied with a confident smile. "I'll see you at the groundbreaking." Thunder cracked overhead as Damon exited the building. He checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Vanessa and a text. "Call me ASAP. Important." He ignored it. Whatever game she was playing could wait. He had just secured his company's future for the next 5 years. The rain intensified as Damon drove his rental car toward his hotel. Distracted by thoughts of Vanessa's betrayal, he failed to notice the semi-truck hydroplaning until it was too late. The massive vehicle slammed into the driver's side of his car, sending it spinning across 3 lanes of traffic before crashing into the concrete barrier. Damon remembered fragments, shattering glass, crushing metal, searing pain, then darkness. He woke 3 days later in Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The damage was extensive: a shattered left femur, fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, and a concussion. The doctors told him recovery would be long and arduous. Physical therapy might restore most functionality, but he would likely walk with a permanent limp and experience chronic pain. Vanessa arrived the following day, her face a practiced mask of concern. Olivia trailed behind, visibly uncomfortable. "Oh, Damon." Vanessa's voice carried the right notes of worry, but her eyes remained cold. "The doctors say you'll need extensive rehabilitation. I've been researching facilities." What Vanessa didn't mention was that she'd spent hours on the phone with Pierce discussing how this development affected their plans. The accident had accelerated their timeline. Over the next week, as Damon drifted in and out of consciousness through a haze of pain medication, Vanessa was busy. She contacted their lawyer, gained temporary power of attorney, and began exploring options for Damon's care, all while systematically transferring funds from their joint accounts to private ones she had established months earlier. By the time Damon was lucid enough to understand his circumstances, Vanessa had already arranged for his discharge and temporary placement in a rehabilitation facility outside their hometown. "It's for the best," she insisted. "You need specialized care, and I need to manage things at home." Damon, still disoriented from medication and trauma, acquiesced. He didn't yet have the strength to confront her betrayal. The day of his discharge, Vanessa and Olivia arrived with a small suitcase of clothes and essentials. The atmosphere was tense as a nurse wheeled Damon to Vanessa's SUV. He required assistance to stand, and the brief transfer from wheelchair to vehicle left him sweating and trembling from exertion. "I can't believe how helpless you are," Olivia muttered, not quite under her breath. Vanessa shot her daughter a warning glance, but there was no real reproach in it. As they drove, Damon noticed they weren't heading toward the interstate that would take them to the rehabilitation center. Instead, they were traveling deeper into rural Illinois. "Where are we going?" he asked, fighting through pain medication fog. "We need to make a quick stop," Vanessa replied, exchanging a look with Olivia in the rearview mirror. "I need coffee for the drive." Damon's instincts, dulled by trauma and drugs, but still functioning, told him something was very wrong. He remained silent, conserving energy and clearing his mind as best he could. They were about to make their move, and he needed to be ready. Chapter 3. Abandoned. They pulled into a roadside diner called May's Place just after noon. The establishment sat isolated among cornfields, the nearest town visible only as a distant cluster of buildings on the horizon. A handful of trucks and cars dotted the gravel parking lot. "I'll get us some lunch to go," Vanessa announced, her voice unnaturally bright. "Olivia, help your father inside. You should use the restroom before a long drive." The effort to exit the vehicle was excruciating. Damon leaned heavily on the temporary cane the hospital had provided, his breath coming in short gasps as pain radiated through his pelvis and leg. Olivia stood nearby, not offering assistance, her expression a mixture of disgust and impatience. Inside, the diner was sparsely populated, a few truckers at the counter, an elderly couple in a booth, and a family with young children near the windows. Damon lowered himself carefully into a booth while Olivia stood awkwardly beside him. "I'll get Mom," she said, turning toward the door. "Wait," Damon called, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "Sit down, Olivia." Perhaps it was the unfamiliar authority in his tone, but she hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him. "How long has your mother been sleeping with Pierce Harrington?" he asked quietly. Color drained from Olivia's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." "Not now." His eyes, clear despite the medication, bored into hers. "You've been helping her hide it." Olivia's shock quickly transformed into defiance. "So what if I have? You were never there anyway. Always working, always gone. I was building a future for us." She laughed, a harsh sound too bitter for a 17-year-old. "No, you were building a future for yourself. Mom and I were just accessories." Vanessa approached the table, having overheard the last exchange. Her practiced smile evaporated. "Well, this is unfortunate timing," she said, placing her purse on the table. "We had planned to have this conversation somewhere more private." "What conversation?" Damon asked, though he already knew. Vanessa slid into the booth beside Olivia, creating a united front against him. "This isn't working, Damon. It hasn't been for years. I met someone who appreciates me, who sees me as more than just the pretty wife at company functions. Pierce Harrington." Damon's voice was flat. Vanessa didn't bother denying it. "Pierce understands me. We connect intellectually, emotionally." She paused physically, "In ways you and I never did. And you decided that while I was recovering from near-fatal injuries was the perfect time to tell me?" "Actually," Vanessa's voice hardened, "we've decided it's over. Pierce and I are starting a new life together. Olivia will be coming with me, of course." "Of course," Damon echoed, a strange calm settling over him. "And what's your plan for me?" Mother and daughter exchanged glances. Olivia spoke first, her young face twisted with cruelty learned from her mother. "We don't need a cripple holding us back," she said, the words striking like physical blows. "You're useless now. You'll never be the same. Pierce says your company will probably fail with you in this condition." Damon stared at his daughter, barely recognizing the child he had once adored. "And you're okay with this? With abandoning your father?" "You're not my real father anyway," Olivia spat. The revelation hit Damon like another car crash. He turned to Vanessa, who shrugged. "Did you really think she was yours? Look at her, Damon. She looks nothing like you. I was already pregnant when we met. I needed stability, a good provider. You were convenient." The pieces fell into place. Why Vanessa had pushed for marriage so quickly. Why Olivia had always felt somewhat distant despite his efforts. 17 years of lies. Vanessa stood abruptly. "We need to go. Pierce is waiting." "You're just going to leave me here?" Damon asked, his voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside him. "Your wallet and phone are in your bag," Vanessa said, already moving toward the door. "There's enough cash for a cab. Figure it out, Damon. You were always good at solving problems." As they walked away, Olivia turned back with a smirk. "Bye, Dad. Don't call us. We'll call you." "Or not." They left, laughing together as they climbed into the SUV. Through the window, Damon watched them open his suitcase, remove his wallet and phone, then toss the bag onto the gravel before driving away. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a name tag reading May, approached his table. She had witnessed enough to understand what had happened. "Honey, are you all right?" she asked, concern evident in her weathered face. "Not particularly," Damon replied with surprising steadiness. "My wife and daughter just abandoned me here. They took my wallet, phone, everything." May's expression darkened. Some people ain't worth the air they breathe. Let me get you some coffee and make a call for you. Thank you, but I don't know who to call. I don't know anyone in this area. May studied him for a moment. You can use our phone. One call. Make it count. As May walked away, Damon sat perfectly still, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over him. 15 years of marriage. 17 years raising a child that wasn't his. His entire life had been built on lies. Most men would break under such revelations. But something different was happening within Damon Westerly. The pain and shock were transforming, crystallizing into something harder and colder. By the time May returned with the diner's cordless phone, his eyes had changed, the warmth replaced by steely resolve. Here you go, honey. One call. Make it a good one, May said, placing the phone before him. Damon stared at it momentarily, then dialed a number from memory. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Sullivan. Ray, it's Damon Westerly. I need your help. A pause. Damon? Christ, I heard about the accident. You okay? No, Damon replied truthfully. I'm in trouble. I need extraction and resources. Like Sarajevo. Another pause, longer this time. That bad. Worse. Location. Damon looked to May. What's the address here? She told him, and he related to Ray. For hours, Ray replied. Hold tight. The call ended. Damon handed the phone back to May. Thank you. Your friend coming to get you? She asked. Yes. He'll be here in a few hours. May nodded, satisfied. Good. Coffee's on the house. You need anything else, you just holler. As May walked away, Damon's phone rang from the pocket of Vanessa's discarded purse, which she had left behind in her haste. Reaching for it, he saw Vanessa's name on the caller ID. He ignored it. Over the next hour, the phone rang repeatedly, 78 times in all. With each call, Damon's resolve strengthened. They had made their choice. Now he would make his. 4 hours later, a black SUV pulled into the diner's parking lot. 2 men in dark suits emerged. Ray Sullivan and another man Damon recognized as Mike Brenner. They entered the diner, immediately spotting Damon. Ray, a barrel-chested former Special Forces operator with close-cropped gray hair, approached the table. Damn, you look like hell. Feel worse, Damon admitted. The car's ready. We've got medical support waiting at the safe house. With their help, Damon stood painfully. As they assisted him toward the door, he stopped at the counter where May was working. Thank you, he said sincerely. You showed kindness to a stranger today. I won't forget it. May waved him off. You take care of yourself. And when you're back on your feet. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Make those bastards pay. Damon's smile was cold and certain. Count on it. As they drove away from May's place, Ray glanced at Damon in the rearview mirror. What's the play here, boss? Damon stared out the window at the passing landscape. His face hardened into a mask of determination. First, we heal. Then we plan. Then we destroy them. All of them. Sounds personal, Mike commented from the passenger seat. It is, Damon confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. They thought they were dealing with the man I was. They're about to discover the man I've become. The SUV continued north, carrying Damon westerly toward a future very different from the one he had imagined, one in which mercy had no place. Chapter 4. Recovery and Revelation. The safe house was a secluded cabin nestled in northern Michigan's dense forest, accessible only by a winding dirt road that disappeared among towering pines. For 3 months, this isolated retreat became Damon's sanctuary and crucible. Ray Sullivan had prepared well. A retired military doctor named Carson arrived the day after Damon, bringing medical equipment and a physical therapy regimen that made hospital rehabilitation look like a spa treatment. The program was brutal but effective, designed for wounded operators who needed to return to the field quickly. This will hurt worse than the accident, Dr. Carson warned on the first day, his weathered face betraying no sympathy. But pain is information. Learn from it. Don't fear it. Damon embraced the pain. While his body slowly rebuilt itself, he focused on gathering information. Ray had assembled a small team, former military and intelligence professionals who had once worked with Damon during his little-known past. Before building his construction empire, Damon had served in military intelligence, then later as a private contractor specializing in problem-solving for government agencies that needed plausible deniability. It was during this period that he had saved Ray's life in Sarajevo, creating a debt that Ray had always promised to repay. "Your wife's been busy," Mike reported 2 weeks into Damon's recovery, laying photographs on the kitchen table. "She reported you missing 3 days after dropping you at the diner. Claimed you left the rehabilitation center against medical advice and disappeared." "Convenient," Damon murmured, examining the photos of Vanessa, speaking tearfully to police officers. "Very. She's playing the worried wife masterfully. Even offered a $50,000 reward for information. Using my money, no doubt." Mike nodded. "She gained full access to your accounts through the power of attorney you signed in the hospital. She's drained about $3 million so far. Would have been more, but your business accounts require secondary authorization." "Lloyd wouldn't have signed off on those transfers," Damon said, referring to his longtime CFO and friend. "He knows all financial decisions go through him if I'm incapacitated. Smart precaution. But your wife tried an end run. Claimed Lloyd was obstructing access to needed funds during a family crisis." Mike slid another photo across the table. Pierce Harrington in a restaurant with a man Damon recognized as Judge Wilson from the county court. "They're seeking a court order to remove Lloyd and install Harrington as interim financial advisor to your company." Rage flashed across Damon's face before he controlled it. "Judge Wilson was a guest at my fundraiser last year. He sat at my table, drank my scotch, and promised support for the children's hospital I funded." "Loyalty's cheap these days," Ray commented, entering with coffee mugs. "But we've got more. Tell him about the daughter, Mike." Mike hesitated. "This might be difficult to hear." "I already know she's not mine," Damon said flatly. "What else?" "She's been romantically involved with Harrington's son, Trevor, for at least 6 months. She turned 18 last week and moved into Trevor's apartment the same day." This revelation hit harder than Damon had expected. Despite learning Olivia wasn't his biological daughter, 17 years of raising her had created genuine attachments. The knowledge that she had been part of the conspiracy, sleeping with the son of her mother's lover while helping destroy the man who had raised her, cut deeply. "And there's more," Mike continued reluctantly. "Vanessa is pregnant. For months along, according to medical records we accessed. Harrington's the father." Damon absorbed this final betrayal in silence, his face unreadable. The others exchanged concerned glances, uncertain how he would react. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, controlled. "Show me everything you have on Harrington. I want to know who he is, who he answers to, every account he manages, every client he serves, every secret he keeps." Over the following weeks, as Damon progressed from Walker to Kane, the team compiled an extensive dossier on Pierce Harrington. The picture that emerged was illuminating. Harrington wasn't merely an ambitious wealth manager. He was a calculated predator with a pattern of seducing wealthy female clients, manipulating them into lucrative financial arrangements, then discarding them. Vanessa was simply his latest target, perhaps his most ambitious one. Through her, he aimed to gain control of Damon's construction company and its substantial government contracts. "He's done this before," Damon observed, reviewing the files. 3 times in the past decade. Always married women with significant assets." "Yes, but never at this scale," Ray confirmed. "Your company represents a much bigger prize than his previous conquests." By the 6th week of recovery, Damon could walk unassisted for short periods. The chronic pain remained, but he had learned to function through it, even use it, the constant reminder of betrayal fueling his resolve. During physical therapy one morning, Dr. Carson observed, "Your recovery rate is remarkable. Most patients with your injuries would still be in a wheelchair." "Most patients aren't motivated by revenge," Damon replied, completing another punishing set of exercises. "Is that what drives you?" "Revenge." Damon considered the question. "Justice," he finally answered. "They decided I was worthless, disposable. They need to understand the consequences of that miscalculation." In the cabin's makeshift command center, the team continued gathering intelligence. They discovered that Harrington had convinced Vanessa to file for divorce, claiming abandonment. The courts were processing the request, with Vanessa's lawyer arguing that Damon's disappearance constituted desertion. They're pushing for asset division before you're declared legally dead, Mike explained. Harrington's got a judge in his pocket who's fast-tracking the proceedings. Judge Wilson, Damon guessed. The same. They're also spreading rumors that you embezzled government funds and fled to avoid prosecution, creating a narrative to explain your disappearance and potentially seize your company through regulatory intervention. Damon's expression darkened. They're not just taking what I have, they're destroying what I built. By the third month, Damon had regained enough strength to begin the next phase. His body would never fully recover. The limp would remain permanent, as would some degree of pain, but he had adapted, transformed his weaknesses into a new kind of strength. On a crisp autumn morning, he stood on the cabin's porch, watching the sunrise paint the forest in brilliant reds and golds. Ray joined him, offering a steaming mug of coffee. "Team's ready," Ray said simply. "What's the objective?" Damon sipped his coffee, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not destruction, annihilation. I want them to lose everything. Not just money and status, but their sense of security, their belief in their own cleverness. I want them to know what it feels like to be discarded. And after, I rebuild. Something new, something better." Ray nodded, understanding. Phase 1 begins when you give the word. Damon turned to his old friend, his eyes cold with purpose. The word is given. Let's return from the dead. Chapter 5. Assets and Alliances. Damon's return to civilization was carefully orchestrated. Rather than announcing his survival publicly, he moved with surgical precision, reconnecting with key allies while remaining officially missing. His first meeting took place in the private room of an upscale Chicago restaurant. Lloyd Mercer, Westerly Construction's CFO and Damon's right-hand man for over a decade, nearly dropped his drink when Damon walked in. "Jesus Christ," Lloyd whispered, staring as if seeing a ghost. "We thought you were dead." "That was the general idea," Damon replied, easing into the chair across from him. "Sorry for the theatrics, but I needed time." After ensuring they wouldn't be disturbed, Damon recounted everything: the accident, Vanessa's betrayal, and the subsequent months of recovery. Lloyd listened in stunned silence, his expression shifting from shock to rage. "That conniving bitch," he finally spat. "She's been terrorizing the office for months, demanding access to everything. When I refused, she sicked her lawyers on me. They're trying to force me out." "I know. You did well holding them off." Lloyd ran a hand through his thinning hair. "It wasn't just loyalty, Damon. Something about Harrington didn't add up. I had our security team run a background check after their second visit. And his credentials are impeccable on the surface, but there are inconsistencies. Previous positions that can't be verified, references who don't seem to exist beyond paper trails. He's manufactured, Damon. Someone created Pierce Harrington." This new information aligned with what Damon's team had begun to suspect. Harrington wasn't merely a financial predator. He was possibly something more dangerous, a professional con man with connections and resources. "I need your help, Lloyd," Damon said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "This contains new corporate documents establishing a shadow board. As far as the public record shows, you're still fighting Vanessa for control. But in reality, these new entities will begin acquiring our most valuable assets through a series of shell companies." Lloyd pocketed the drive, stripping the company before they can take it, preserving what matters: the government contracts, the equipment, the key personnel. When Vanessa and Harrington finally gain control, they'll find themselves holding an empty shell. What about the employees? Protected. The new entities will rehire everyone through subsidiary contracts. No one loses their job unless they choose Vanessa's side. Lloyd nodded, impressed by the thoroughness of the plan. "And what's my official position if asked about your whereabouts?" "Concerned, cooperative, but ultimately in the dark. Make them believe you're fighting a losing battle." Their meeting concluded with Lloyd pledging his complete support. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. Just say the word." Damon's next alliance proved more challenging to secure. District Attorney Catherine Reynolds had built her career on an uncompromising stance against corruption and fraud. She was also one of the few public officials who had consistently refused Damon's campaign contributions over the years, preferring to maintain her independence. They met at her home on a Sunday afternoon, a meeting arranged through mutual connections that didn't appear on any official calendar. Mr. Westerly, she greeted him at the door, her expression revealing neither surprise nor warmth. Interesting to meet someone who's supposedly missing. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Ms. Reynolds. She led him to a modest study lined with law books. I'm listening, but my time is limited. Make your case. Damon laid out the evidence his team had compiled on Pierce Harrington. The pattern of financial predation, the multiple identities, the connections to offshore accounts linked to several financial fraud investigations. He's not just after my wife and company, Damon concluded. He's positioning himself to gain control of government contracts worth hundreds of millions. Contracts that, if mismanaged, could compromise critical infrastructure projects. Reynolds studied the documents, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Why come to me? Why not the FBI or SEC? Because you can't be bought, Damon answered honestly. And because you understand that justice sometimes requires patience and strategy, not just enforcement. What exactly are you asking for? Not interference, just awareness. When the time comes, and it will, I want you to be ready to move on Harrington based on evidence, not on whatever narrative he constructs. Reynolds closed the file, her expression thoughtful. I don't condone vigilante justice, Mr. Westerly. I'm not asking you to. I'm providing information about potential financial crimes that fall within your jurisdiction. What you do with that information is entirely your prerogative. After a long moment, she nodded. I'll keep this on my radar. But understand this. If you break the law in your pursuit of justice, I won't hesitate to prosecute you as well. I would expect nothing less. As Damon built his coalition of allies, Ray and Mike worked on infiltrating Harrington's operation. Mike, leveraging his background in corporate espionage, secured a position in the bank's security department. Ray focused on Harrington's personal life, establishing surveillance on his residence, office, and regular haunts. Their efforts yielded valuable intelligence. Harrington maintained a separate apartment where he conducted business away from Vanessa's knowledge. He had regular meetings with men identified as having connections to organized crime in Boston and Philadelphia. Most importantly, they discovered he was preparing to move substantial funds offshore once the court granted him control of Damon's assets. He's planning to gut your company and disappear, Ray reported during their weekly briefing at a secure location. Vanessa's just another mark to him. Once he has what he wants, he'll discard her like the others. Does she suspect anything? Damon asked. No. She's completely committed to the fantasy he's selling. Marriage, family, social prominence. She believes they're building a future together. Damon absorbed this information without visible emotion. And Olivia? Mike hesitated before answering. She's fully integrated into Harrington's world. Trevor has her wrapped around his finger. She's been helping them access your personal files, providing passwords and information about your private accounts. The daughter helping to destroy the father, Damon murmured. How biblical. By the end of the 4th month, Damon had assembled his resources, loyal employees positioned throughout his corporate structure, legal allies prepared to act when needed, and a comprehensive understanding of his opponent's strengths and vulnerabilities. The final piece came from an unexpected source. May, the waitress from the roadside diner, had not forgotten Damon. Through her own initiative, she had gathered information about Vanessa and Harrington's visits to the small town near the diner, a location they apparently used for clandestine meetings before Damon's accident. They came through every few weeks, May explained during a phone call Ray had arranged. Always flashing money around, treating everyone like servants. They didn't realize that in small towns, people notice everything. May had collected statements from hotel staff, restaurant servers, and local shopkeepers, all documenting Vanessa and Harrington's presence and behavior over the previous year. This timeline proved their affair had begun much earlier than Damon had initially believed, strengthening his legal position regarding asset division. Why are you helping me? Damon asked her. Because I recognize the look of someone who's been betrayed by those they trusted most, May answered simply. And because some wrongs need to be righted. With his network established and resources secured, Damon convened his inner circle for the final planning session. In a renovated warehouse that served as their headquarters, he outlined the strategy that would bring down Harrington and Vanessa. "We now know Harrington's real identity," Damon announced, displaying documents on the large screen. Peter Caldwell, born in Newark, convicted of financial fraud in 2010, but released after testifying against his partners. He disappeared afterward, resurfacing 3 years later as Pierce Harrington with documents created by a known identity broker. Lloyd studied the information with growing alarm. He's not just a con man. He's a cooperating witness who violated his agreement with the federal prosecutor. Exactly, which makes him vulnerable in ways he doesn't anticipate. Over the next several hours, they refined the plan, a multi-layered strategy designed to isolate Harrington from his support systems, expose his fraudulent activities, and ultimately force a confrontation in which he would have no choice but to reveal his true nature. As the meeting concluded, Ray asked the question they'd all been considering. What about Vanessa and Olivia? How far are we taking this? Damon's expression remained impassive. They made their choice when they left me at that diner. They'll experience the full consequences of that decision. No one questioned further. The lines had been drawn, the plans set in motion. Phase 1 was complete. Damon had risen from the ashes of his former life and assembled the weapons needed for his counterattack. Now it was time to spring the trap. Chapter 6, The Gambit. On a crisp December morning, exactly 6 months after being abandoned at May's place, Damon Westerly officially returned from the dead. His reappearance was strategically orchestrated for maximum impact. The quarterly board meeting of Westerly Construction was underway in the company's gleaming downtown headquarters. Vanessa, now acting as Damon's proxy through her power of attorney, sat at the head of the conference table. Pierce Harrington occupied the chair to her right, acting as her financial advisor. They were presenting their vision for the company's future, a restructuring plan that would effectively dismantle its most valuable divisions while creating new executive positions with extraordinary compensation packages. Lloyd Mercer sat stone-faced as Vanessa detailed how the company would honor Damon's legacy while pivoting toward more innovative business models, euphemisms for the systematic looting they had planned. Before we vote on these proposals, Lloyd interjected when she finally paused, "I believe we should address the elephant in the room." "What elephant?" Vanessa asked, irritation flashing across her carefully made-up face. "The question of leadership succession in light of recent developments." Harrington leaned forward. "Mr. Mercer, we've been patient with your obstructionism, but the court has been clear. In her husband's absence, Mrs. Westerly has full legal authority to direct this company as she sees fit." "Fascinating perspective," a new voice commented from the doorway. "I'd be interested to hear more about my wife's vision for my company." The room fell silent as Damon entered, leaning slightly on an elegant black cane. He was thinner than before the accident, his face more angular, but he moved with deliberate confidence. The expensive suit couldn't quite conceal the physical changes wrought by his ordeal, but they somehow enhanced rather than diminished his presence. Vanessa's face drained of color. "Damon? How? Where have you been?" "Recovering. Thinking. Planning." He smiled without warmth. "Please, don't let me interrupt. You were explaining how you plan to honor my legacy while dismantling everything I've built." Harrington recovered first, rising to his feet with practiced charm. "Damon, this is a tremendous relief. We've been desperately searching for you, worried sick. Spare me the performance, Mr. Harrington. Or should I call you Caldwell?" Peter Caldwell, federal informant, convicted fraudster. The name hit Harrington like a physical blow. He sank back in his chair, eyes darting toward the exits. Damon addressed the stunned board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my prolonged absence. As you can see, my recovery from the accident has been challenging. During this time, certain parties have attempted to use my temporary incapacitation for their personal gain." He activated the room's projection system with a remote, displaying documentation of Harrington's true identity and criminal history. This man is not a legitimate financial advisor. He is a convicted felon operating under a false identity, in violation of his federal cooperation agreement. He has systematically targeted wealthy women, including my wife, as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise. Vanessa found her voice, though it trembled slightly. These are ridiculous accusations. Pierce has been my rock during this terrible time. We've been trying to find you for months. Have you? Damon's voice was dangerously soft. 78 calls to my phone the day you left me at that diner. 78 increasingly desperate attempts to reach me after you realized what I'd done. Confusion crossed Vanessa's face. What are you talking about? What diner? Damon continued as if she hadn't spoken. You left so quickly you forgot your purse. The one containing the offshore account information. The one with the handwritten note from Judge Wilson assuring you he would fast-track the divorce and asset division. Understanding dawned on Vanessa's face, followed quickly by calculation. She straightened in her chair, switching tactics. Damon, you're not well. The accident, the trauma, you're confused. We should discuss this privately, as a family. Family? Damon's laugh held no humor. Like the family that called me a useless cripple? The family that drove away laughing after abandoning me, without phone, wallet, or transportation. That family. The board members watched in shock as the drama unfolded. Lloyd cleared his throat. Perhaps we should postpone this meeting to allow for... No, Damon cut him off. No more delays. This ends today. He turned back to the board. You have before you evidence of attempted corporate fraud. I am officially resuming my position as CEO, effective immediately. Security will escort Mr. Harrington from the premises. My wife is welcome to leave with him. Harrington stood abruptly. You can't do this. We have legal protections in place. The court has been fully briefed on your activities, Damon interrupted. District Attorney Reynolds is currently executing search warrants on your office, residence, and the apartment you maintain on Riverside Drive. The one my wife doesn't know about. Vanessa's head snapped toward Harrington. What apartment? Pierce. Ignoring her, Harrington addressed Damon directly, his charm replaced by cold calculation. Whatever you think you know, you can't prove intent. I'm a financial advisor doing my job. Your wife sought my professional help during a difficult time. Is that the story you're going with? Damon asked mildly. He activated the projection system again, this time displaying text messages between Harrington and Trevor discussing their long game with Vanessa and Olivia. The messages explicitly outlined their plan to gain control of Damon's assets, including references to the convenient accident that facilitated their timeline. Harrington's composure cracked. Those are private communications. You had no right. Speaking of communication, Damon continued relentlessly. Olivia sends her regrets. She won't be joining us today. She's currently being interviewed by federal agents regarding her role in accessing secured company servers. Trevor is similarly engaged. The color drained from Harrington's face. You're bluffing. In response, Damon played a video clip on the projection screen. Surveillance footage showing federal agents escorting Trevor and a visibly distraught Olivia from Trevor's apartment building. This is happening concurrently across the city, Damon informed the room. Mr. Harrington's network is being dismantled as we speak. His offshore accounts have been frozen. His false identity has been reported to the federal authorities who granted him witness protection. Protection he violated by resuming criminal activities. Vanessa, finally grasping the magnitude of what was unfolding, turned on Harrington. What is he talking about? What have you done? Harrington's response was immediate and brutal, self-preservation overriding any pretense of affection. This is absurd. Vanessa approached me. She orchestrated everything. She told me her husband was abusive, controlling. She begged for my help in escaping him. That's a lie. Vanessa cried. You pursued me. You said we were soulmates. Soulmates. Harrington scoffed. You were a target, a means to an end, just like the others. Others. Vanessa whispered. Enough. Damon interrupted their deteriorating exchange. Security will escort you both out. Mr. Harrington, federal agents are waiting in the lobby. Vanessa, you're free to leave, though I suggest consulting a lawyer immediately. The divorce proceedings you initiated will continue, though perhaps not on the terms you anticipated. As security personnel entered the boardroom, Harrington made a desperate lunge toward Damon. Whether to attack or plead, it wasn't clear. He never reached his target. Ray Sullivan, positioned unobtrusively near the door, intercepted him with practiced efficiency, subduing him with a grip that made the younger man gasp in pain. "That's not necessary, Ray," Damon said calmly. Mr. Harrington was just expressing his frustration at having his plans disrupted. Ray released Harrington, who straightened his suit with as much dignity as he could muster. "This isn't over, Westerly." "For you, it is," Damon replied. "Completely and irrevocably over." As Harrington was led away, Vanessa remained, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Damon, please. We need to talk. This pregnancy is not my concern," Damon finished for her. "You made your choice, Vanessa. Now you'll live with it. You can't just throw away 15 years of marriage." "I didn't," Damon replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "You did." At a roadside diner in Illinois, security approached to escort her out. Before leaving, she made one last desperate appeal. "What about Olivia? Whatever you think of me, she's still your daughter." "No," Damon said quietly. "She never was." After they were gone, Damon addressed the stunned board members. "I apologize for the drama. It was necessary to resolve this situation decisively. Now, shall we return to the actual business of this company?" For the next 2 hours, Damon methodically outlined his vision for Westerly Construction's future, the legitimate restructuring needed after his absence, the new projects on the horizon, the leadership changes that would strengthen rather than weaken the organization. The board, still reeling from the morning's events, unanimously approved his proposals. As the meeting concluded, Lloyd approached Damon privately. "That was quite a return. Theatrical, I know, but necessary. What happens now?" "With Vanessa, Harrington, all of it." Damon's expression revealed nothing. Phase 1 is complete. Harrington is exposed, his operation compromised. Vanessa is isolated from her support system. Phase 2 begins tomorrow, which is the systematic dismantling of everything they value, starting with their freedom. As Damon left the boardroom, leaning slightly on his cane, the remaining executives exchanged uneasy glances. The man who had returned was not the same one who had left. Something fundamental had changed in Damon Westerly. Something cold and implacable that recognized no limits and offered no mercy. The reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 7. Checkmate. 3 days after Damon's dramatic return, Pierce Harrington sat in an interrogation room at the federal building, his designer suit replaced by prison orange, his confident demeanor eroded by 72 hours of questioning and isolation. Across from him, Assistant U.S. Attorney Brian Winters reviewed a thick file of documents. "Your situation is precarious, Mr. Caldwell. Violation of your witness protection agreement, identity fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. Shall I continue?" Harrington maintained a veneer of composure. "I have information to trade. Valuable information. About Westerly, his company, government contract irregularities." Winters smiled thinly. "Interesting that you'd mention that. We've thoroughly investigated Westerly Construction over the past several months. Know what we found? Impeccable records. Exceptional compliance. Not even a parking ticket." "He's hiding something," Harrington insisted. "Everyone is. Not everyone systematically targets wealthy women and attempts to seize their assets." Winters closed the file. "Your previous cooperation agreement is void. We're proceeding with all charges, including the original ones that were suspended during your cooperation." "Wait." Harrington leaned forward desperately. "What if I could give you someone else? Someone bigger?" "I'm listening." "Bradley Summers." The name hung in the air between them. Bradley Summers was the managing director of First Atlantic Bank, Harrington's employer and one of the most powerful financial institutions in the Northeast. What about him? He knew everything, approved everything. The targeting of wealthy clients, the manipulation of their assets, all of it. It was his program. I was just implementing it. Winters studied Harrington carefully. You're claiming that a systematic predatory scheme targeting wealthy women was officially sanctioned by First Atlantic Bank. Not officially. Plausible deniability and all that. But Summers personally selected the targets, provided the resources, and took a percentage of every acquisition. It was exactly what Damon had predicted. When cornered, Harrington would sacrifice anyone to save himself. This revelation was the key to Phase 2 of Damon's plan, using Harrington to expose corruption that extended far beyond a single financial predator. Across town, Vanessa faced her own reckoning. Returning to the mansion she had shared with Damon, she found the locks changed and security personnel politely but firmly denying her entry. "This is my home," she protested. "My clothes, my jewelry, my personal items are all inside." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Westerly," the security officer replied. "We have strict instructions. The property is under legal review pending divorce proceedings. You can contact Mr. Westerly's attorney to arrange for the retrieval of personal belongings." "This is ridiculous. I've lived here for 15 years. "Yes, ma'am. And there's a court order preventing access until ownership is legally determined." The court order, obtained by Damon's legal team within hours of his return, cited evidence that Vanessa had attempted to transfer ownership of multiple properties during Damon's disappearance, constituting potential fraud. With nowhere else to go, Vanessa checked into a hotel using the credit card Harrington had given her. By evening, that card was declined. All of Harrington's accounts had been frozen as part of the federal investigation. Increasingly desperate, she called Olivia, only to have her call sent straight to voicemail. Unknown to Vanessa, Olivia was facing her own crisis. Released from federal questioning with stern warnings about potential charges related to unauthorized computer access, she had returned to Trevor's apartment to find him gone, along with all her possessions and the emergency cash she had hidden there. Trevor had made his choice with the same cold calculation his father had taught him. Once Olivia became a liability rather than an asset, he abandoned her without hesitation, taking anything of value she possessed. By nightfall, both Vanessa and Olivia were effectively homeless, penniless, and isolated, exactly as Damon had planned. The next morning, Damon met with District Attorney Reynolds in her office. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Your timing is impeccable, as always," she replied, gesturing for him to sit. "The Harrington, or should I say Caldwell, investigation has opened some interesting doors. I heard he's cooperating again." Enthusiastically. "He's implicated half the executive team at First Atlantic in what appears to be a systematic fraud operation targeting wealthy clients. The SEC is involved now, along with federal prosecutors." Damon nodded, unsurprised. "And my wife's role in all this?" Reynolds studied him carefully. "That's where things get complicated. Technically, she hasn't committed any crimes. Being manipulated by a con man isn't illegal. The attempted asset transfers during your absence were initiated under her legal power of attorney. Morally questionable, perhaps, but not clearly criminal." "I understand," Damon replied calmly. "I'm not seeking criminal charges against Vanessa. My interests lie elsewhere, with Harrington and his superiors." "Precisely. The infection goes deeper than one predatory financial advisor. First Atlantic has been running this operation for years, targeting vulnerable, wealthy individuals, particularly women, and systematically stripping them of assets." Reynolds leaned back in her chair. "You didn't come here to be updated on an investigation you clearly know more about than I do. What do you want, Mr. Westerly?" "A favor. When you move on First Atlantic, I want to be there." "That's highly irregular." "So, is a bank running a systematic fraud operation targeting specific demographics? I can help identify additional victims, connect patterns that might otherwise be missed." Reynolds considered his request. "I can't have civilians involved in law enforcement operations. Not asking to kick in doors. Just to be present when you interview Bradley Summers as a consultant on financial fraud patterns." After a long moment, Reynolds nodded. "I'll arrange it, but you observe only." "Understood. Perfectly." 2 days later, Damon sat silently in an adjacent observation room as Reynolds and federal agents questioned Bradley Summers about First Atlantic's special client initiative. On the surface, Summers maintained composure, denying any knowledge of Harrington's activities. But as evidence mounted, internal emails, transferred files, recorded conversations provided by Harrington, his facade began to crack. The breaking point came when Reynolds presented a recorded conversation between Summers and Harrington discussing Vanessa specifically, referring to her as a premium acquisition target due to Damon's assets and her psychological vulnerability to flattery and attention. "She's perfect," Summers could be heard saying on the recording. "Vain, insecure despite the wealth, desperate for validation. Classic profile. How soon can you move her into position?" Watching through the one-way glass, Damon felt no satisfaction at this confirmation of what he already knew, that Vanessa had been deliberately targeted, manipulated by experts who recognized and exploited her weaknesses. It changed nothing about her choices or actions, but it did expand the scope of his vengeance beyond the immediate players. By the end of the week, First Atlantic Bank was under full regulatory investigation. 11 executives, including Summers, faced criminal charges. The bank's stock plummeted as news of the scandal broke, triggering a financial crisis that rippled through related institutions. Damon watched it unfold from his office, where Lloyd had just delivered the latest update. First Atlantic's collapse is triggering regulatory reviews at 3 other major banks, Lloyd reported. They're finding similar patterns: systematic targeting of wealthy individuals through personal relationships, staged romances, manufactured investment opportunities. "An industry-wide cancer," Damon observed, "that you've exposed. The financial press is calling it the biggest consumer fraud scandal since Madoff." Damon's expression remained impassive, and Harrington, singing like a canary. In exchange for reduced charges, he's providing evidence against everyone: Summers, other executives, even his own son. Trevor's been charged with related fraud counts and evidence tampering. A father sacrificing his son to save himself, Damon mused. How fitting. Lloyd hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. Vanessa's been trying to reach you. Persistently. She's staying at a women's shelter downtown. Apparently, all her resources have been cut off. As expected, she's claiming the pregnancy is high risk, seeking emergency financial support pending the divorce settlement." Damon considered this information dispassionately. "Have our legal team arrange for her medical expenses only. Direct payment to providers, no cash. And inform her that any further communication must go through the attorneys." And Olivia? A flicker of something, not quite emotion, perhaps memory, crossed Damon's face before disappearing. She made her choice. Let her live with it. That evening, as Damon reviewed documents in his newly purchased penthouse overlooking the city, his secure phone rang. It was Ray. "Phase 3 is ready," Ray reported without preamble. "May's coordinating locally. Everything's in place for tomorrow." "Good. Anyone getting cold feet?" "Just the opposite. The victims Harrington left behind. They're eager to participate. 5 women whose lives he destroyed. They want closure." Damon nodded, though Ray couldn't see it. "Confirm with May. We move at noon." The final phase of Damon's plan was perhaps the most elegant and the most devastating. Having systematically stripped Harrington, Vanessa, and their accomplices of financial resources, social standing, and freedom, he now moved to deprive them of the last thing they valued: their narratives. The following day, 5 women gathered in a hotel conference room near the federal building. Each had been victimized by Harrington during his predatory career. Each had lost assets, reputation, and, in some cases, family relationships due to his manipulations. Each had been contacted by May, who had spent months tracking them down through records and social media. May herself presided over the gathering, her waitress uniform replaced by a business-like pantsuit. "Ladies, thank you for coming. You all know why you're here. Today, you'll meet with federal prosecutors to share your experiences with Peter Caldwell, aka Pierce Harrington. Your testimony will ensure he never hurts anyone else." One woman raised her hand hesitantly. "Will we have to see him? I don't think I can face him." "No direct confrontation," May assured her. "Just recorded statements that become part of the case file. Mr. Westerly has arranged legal representation for each of you at no cost." On cue, Damon entered the room, leaning on his cane. The women fell silent, some recognizing him from news coverage of the unfolding scandal. "I won't take much of your time," he addressed them. "I simply wanted to thank you personally for your courage. Like you, my family was targeted by this man. Like you, I watched as someone I trusted was manipulated and turned against me." He paused, surveying the room. "But unlike Harrington's previous victims, I had resources and knowledge to fight back. Today, you're not just helping build a case against one man. You're exposing a system that has victimized countless individuals. Your voices matter. Your experiences matter." The sincerity in Damon's voice moved several women to tears. One stood and approached him. "My husband left me after believing Harrington's lies about my mental stability," she said quietly. "My children won't speak to me. I lost everything." Damon met her gaze steadily. "I know, and while I can't restore what you've lost, I can promise you this. Harrington and his enablers will pay for what they've done. Not just legally, but completely. They will understand what it means to lose everything they value." As the women prepare to give their statements, Damon left the hotel, his part in this phase complete. The victim testimonies would ensure maximum sentences for Harrington and his superiors. More importantly, they would forever define him as a predator in the public record. No future reinvention, no second chances. Back in his office, Damon received regular updates as events unfolded. Harrington's cooperation agreement collapsed when prosecutors discovered he was still withholding information. Trevor, following his father's example, attempted to trade information for leniency, further implicating both Harrington and Summers in additional schemes. The final piece fell into place when Vanessa, desperate and isolated, approached prosecutors offering to testify about conversations she had overheard between Harrington and his associates. Her statement, while limited in scope, provided collaborative evidence for specific fraud charges. By day's end, the case against First Atlantic's leadership was solidified. The scandal had expanded to include regulatory investigations of 3 additional financial institutions. And Damon Westerly, once left for dead at a roadside diner, had orchestrated one of the most comprehensive takedowns in financial history. That evening, he sat alone in his penthouse, watching the city lights below. The phone call he had been expecting finally came. "It's done," Ray reported. Harrington's plea deal collapsed. He's facing 25 to 30 years. Summers and 3 other executives took deals. They'll testify against the remaining holdouts. Trevor's looking at 5 to 10 for his role. And the women's testimonies entered into evidence. Harrington tried to have them excluded, but the judge denied the motion. Their statements are now part of the permanent record. Damon nodded, satisfied. "And our other matters?" "Vanessa's divorce filing is proceeding. Given the circumstances, her claims on your assets have been significantly reduced. The prenuptial agreement you had is being enforced despite her challenges. She'll receive the minimum settlement required by law, enough to live on, but not in the manner she's accustomed to. The pregnancy? Confirmed legitimate, due in 5 months." Damon absorbed this information without visible reaction. "And Olivia?" Ray hesitated. "She's struggling. Trevor cleaned her out before disappearing. She's been staying with friends, looking for work. No contact with Vanessa. Keep monitoring both situations. No direct intervention." "Understood. Anything else?" Damon considered the question. "Yes. Arrange a meeting with May for tomorrow. I have a proposition for her." The call ended, leaving Damon alone with his thoughts. The plan he had set in motion months ago had executed perfectly. Harrington and his network were destroyed. Vanessa and Olivia were experiencing the consequences of their betrayal. Justice, by his definition, had been served. Yet as he gazed out at the city skyline, Damon felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a cold certainty that what he had done was necessary. The man abandoned at that roadside diner had died that day. The man who emerged was something else entirely. Someone who recognized betrayal as the only unforgivable sin and extracted its full price without hesitation or remorse. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. For now, Damon Westerly stood alone at the pinnacle he had reclaimed, master once again of all he surveyed, and utterly beyond the reach of mercy or regret. Chapter 8. Consequences. Spring arrived, painting the city with tentative color after the long winter. In a modest apartment across town, Vanessa Westerly, though she still used the name despite the nearly finalized divorce, attempted to assemble a crib she had purchased secondhand. At 7 months pregnant, the physical exertion left her breathless and frustrated. The apartment was a stark contrast to the mansion she had once presided over, a one-bedroom unit in a working-class neighborhood, furnished with items from discount stores and thrift shops. Gone were the designer clothes, luxury vehicles, and social invitations. What remained was the growing reality of a life she had never envisioned for herself. The buzzer sounded, startling her. Through the intercom, she heard a familiar voice. "It's Olivia. Can I come up?" Vanessa buzzed her in, hastily attempting to make the apartment more presentable. They hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months, their relationship fractured by mutual blame and recrimination. Olivia entered cautiously, looking thinner and older than her 18 years. Gone was the confident, entitled young woman who had once mocked her father's disability. This Olivia moved with the wariness of someone who had learned harsh lessons about trust and consequence. "I brought these," she said, holding up a bag of baby clothes. "Found them at a church donation center. They're not fancy, but they're clean." "Thank you," Vanessa replied, accepting the offering. An awkward silence fell between them. Olivia surveyed the half-assembled crib. "Need help with that?" "Please." They worked together quietly, mother and daughter finding temporary common ground in the practical task. When the crib was finally assembled, they sat on Vanessa's worn sofa, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "Have you heard from him?" Olivia finally asked. Vanessa didn't need to ask which him, she meant. Only through lawyers. "The divorce will be final next month. I'm getting the legal minimum, enough for basic support for a few years. Then I'm on my own. And the baby? He's acknowledged paternity, but waived all parental rights. He'll pay child support as legally required, nothing more." Olivia nodded, unsurprised. "That's more than he's done for me. You're not his biological child, Liv. You never were. I know that now. But I was raised as his daughter for 17 years. That should count for something." Bitterness tinged her voice. "Instead, he's erased me completely. No contact, no support, nothing." Vanessa sighed, resting a hand on her swollen belly. "We did this to ourselves, Olivia. We chose Pierce. Peter, whatever his name was. We betrayed Damon in every possible way. Did you really expect forgiveness?" "Not forgiveness. Just..." Olivia struggled to articulate what she wanted. "Recognition that I exist. That those years happened. They did happen, but they meant something different to him than they did to us." Vanessa's tone held resignation rather than anger. "We saw him as a provider, a means to the lifestyle we wanted. He thought he was building a family." The truth of this statement hung in the air between them, a belated recognition of the fundamental disconnect that had defined their family. Across the city, Damon concluded a board meeting at Westerly Construction Headquarters. The company had not merely survived the turmoil of the past year, it had thrived. With Damon's return and the strategic restructuring he had implemented, their government contracts had expanded and new private sector opportunities had emerged. As the executives filed out, Lloyd remained behind. "The first Atlantic trial dates have been set. Prosecutors want to confirm your availability to testify." "I'll be there," Damon replied, organizing documents into his briefcase. "Any other updates?" Lloyd hesitated. "Personal matter. Vanessa's obstetrician contacted our legal department. There are complications with the pregnancy, nothing life-threatening, but requiring additional monitoring. Insurance questions." Damon's expression revealed nothing. "Ensure all medical expenses are covered as outlined in the settlement agreement. No restrictions on necessary care." "Understood." "And," Lloyd paused, choosing his words carefully, "there's been a development with Olivia. She's applied to State University for the fall semester, seeking financial aid and student loans since she's no longer eligible for the college fund you established. For a brief moment, something flickered across Damon's face. Not quite regret, perhaps something closer to recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by his now customary impassivity. "That's her prerogative," he replied neutrally. "Was there anything else?" Lloyd shook his head, knowing better than to push the issue. "The new lakefront project proposals are ready when you are." After Lloyd departed, Damon remained at the conference table, gazing out at the city skyline. The First Atlantic scandal had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, revealing systemic fraud throughout several major financial institutions. Bradley Summers had accepted a plea deal, implicating higher executives in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harrington, having violated his cooperation agreement, faced the full weight of federal charges without mitigation. The professional satisfaction of this outcome was undeniable. Damon had not merely survived an attempt to destroy him. He had systematically dismantled the entire criminal enterprise that had targeted him and countless others. Yet personal satisfaction remained elusive. The hollowness that had taken root the day of his abandonment persisted, unaffected by his victories or the suffering of those who had betrayed him. His phone chimed with a message from Ray. Meeting confirmed. May arriving at 2 p.m. Damon checked his watch. He had just enough time to review the documents for his next appointment before May's arrival. At precisely 2 p.m., May was shown into his office. She had transformed significantly since their first encounter at the roadside diner. Her waitress uniform replaced by a tailored business suit, her formerly tired expression now reflecting confidence and purpose. "Mr. Westerly," she greeted him, extending her hand. "Or should I just call you Damon now that I'm officially on your payroll?" "Damon is fine," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "How is the program progressing?" The program was Damon's newest initiative, a foundation established to support victims of financial predators like Harrington. May, with her natural empathy and newfound administrative skills, had proven the perfect director for the operation. "We've identified 23 additional victims across 5 states," she reported, providing legal support to 12 who are pursuing civil damages. The support groups are growing weekly. Women who lost everything are finding their voices again. Damon nodded, satisfied. "And the educational outreach?" "Expanding. We've developed materials identifying warning signs of financial predation. 3 regional banks have adopted our training modules for their staff. It's making a difference." There was pride in May's voice, the pride of someone who had found meaningful purpose after years of routine work. Damon had recognized her potential that first day at the diner, seeing in her not just kindness but intelligence and determination that circumstances had never allowed her to fully express. "I have something new for you to consider," Damon said, sliding a folder across the desk. "A scholarship program for individuals affected by financial fraud. Educational opportunities for those who lost access to college funds or career training due to victimization." May reviewed the proposal, her expression thoughtful. "This is substantial funding. You're talking about full rides for dozens of students annually." "Yes, the foundation can absorb the cost. The question is implementation. Can you develop selection criteria and an application process?" "Of course," May answered confidently. "But may I ask what prompted this specific initiative?" Damon's expression revealed nothing. "It addresses an identified need. Nothing more." May studied him with the perceptiveness that had drawn him to hire her initially. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your daughter's college application, would it?" "Former daughter," Damon corrected automatically. "And no, this program will help genuine victims rebuild their lives." May didn't press further, but a knowing look crossed her face. "I'll have preliminary framework by next week. Any specific requirements for eligibility? Keep it broad. Focus on potential rather than past performance. People who've experienced trauma often show inconsistent academic histories." After May departed with the proposal, Damon returned to his scheduled meetings and calls. The rhythm of business, contracts, negotiations, strategic decisions filled the remainder of his day, demanding complete attention and leaving no room for personal reflections. Evening found him alone in his penthouse, reviewing final documents for an upcoming project. A glass of whiskey sat untouched at his elbow, a habit from his former life that now held little appeal. The intercom announced an unexpected visitor, Ray Sullivan. "Sorry to drop in unannounced," Ray said upon entering. "Thought this was better delivered in person." He handed Damon a manila envelope. Inside was a sonogram image and a brief medical report. "Routine monitoring," Ray explained. "As you requested, the pregnancy is progressing. Some concerns about low birth weight, but otherwise stable." Damon studied the sonogram briefly before returning it to the envelope. "Thank you. There's more," Ray continued. "Vanessa's been inquiring about employment opportunities. Limited options given her background. Essentially a trophy wife with no practical experience. She's applied for receptionist positions at several firms." "Not our concern." "Of course not," Ray agreed. "Just keeping you updated as instructed." A long silence fell between the two men, friends and comrades who had endured combat together in both military and civilian settings. Finally, Ray asked the question he had been holding back for months. "Is it enough, Damon? Has justice been served?" Damon considered the question. Justice is an abstract concept. What we've achieved is consequence. Everyone involved has faced the natural outcome of their actions. That's all anyone can expect in this world. And what about your consequences? Ray pressed gently. "You've won, destroyed your enemies, rebuilt your company. But what cost to yourself?" Damon's expression hardened slightly. "That's not relevant, isn't it? The man I knew in Sarajevo, the one who risked his life to save mine, he understood that survival meant more than just continuing to exist. That man died at a roadside diner in Illinois," Damon replied flatly. Ray shook his head. "I don't believe that. Not entirely. The scholarship program May mentioned, that wasn't the action of a dead man." Damon made no response, his face revealing nothing. "Just something to consider," Ray said, moving toward the door. "Revenge is satisfying. Justice is necessary. But neither one is enough to build a life on." After Ray's departure, Damon returned to his work, pushing the conversation from his mind. Yet later, as midnight approached, he found himself opening his laptop and accessing a secured folder of personal files, something he had not done since before the accident. Family photos filled the screen. Holidays, vacations, celebrations spanning 15 years. Vanessa's face in the earlier images showed genuine happiness, before ambition and dissatisfaction had corrupted her. Olivia's progression from toddler to teenager was captured in dozens of moments. First day of school, dance recitals, father-daughter camping trips, all built on lies. Yet the emotions Damon had experienced in those moments had been real. The pride, the love, the sense of purpose that came from believing he was building something that would outlast him. He closed the folder without dwelling on the images. The past was immutable. What mattered was the path forward, shaped by decisions made with clear eyes and unclouded judgment. The following morning brought news that Pierce Harrington had accepted a final plea deal, 30 years without possibility of early parole in exchange for testimony that would dismantle the remainder of the fraud network. His son Trevor received 8 years for his role in the scheme. Damon received this update during his morning briefing with Lloyd, acknowledging it with a brief nod before moving on to company business. The matter was concluded. Justice, by his definition, had been served. That afternoon, he visited the rehabilitation center funded by his foundation, a facility specializing in trauma recovery for accident victims. As he toured the physical therapy department, leaning slightly on his cane, a young therapist approached him. "Mr. Westerly, I hope you don't mind my interrupting. I just wanted to thank you personally for establishing this center. My brother was in a motorcycle accident last year, similar injuries to yours. The care he received here made all the difference." Damon accepted her gratitude with a polite nod. "I'm glad we could help. Recovery is as much about opportunity as it is about determination." "Exactly," she agreed enthusiastically. "With the right support, people can rebuild after even the most devastating losses." Something in her words resonated beyond their immediate context. Damon considered them as he completed his tour, his mind turning over possibilities previously unexamined. That evening, he made a call he had been contemplating for weeks. District Attorney Reynolds speaking. Catherine, it's Damon Westerly. I have a proposition I'd like to discuss. I'm listening. The victim support network we've established through my foundation, I want to expand it. Create a formal partnership with your office to identify and assist victims of financial crimes before they fall through the cracks. Reynolds' interest was evident in her voice. That's ambitious. What are you envisioning exactly? Comprehensive support, legal assistance, financial counseling, psychological services, educational opportunities. A path forward for people who've lost everything. Why now? The First Atlanta case is essentially closed. Damon's response came after a thoughtful pause. Because ending something isn't the same as building something. I've been focused on the former. Perhaps it's time to prioritize the latter. Their conversation continued for nearly an hour, outlining a partnership that would transform victim services across the state. By the call's conclusion, the framework for a new initiative had taken shape, one that would extend far beyond Damon's personal vendetta against those who had betrayed him. As he ended the call, Damon felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness for those who had wronged him, but perhaps the first tentative step towards something beyond revenge. A recognition that destroying what had hurt him was only half the equation. Building something meaningful from the aftermath might be the greater challenge, and ultimately, the more significant victory. The man who had been abandoned at May's place would never return. That version of Damon Westerly was indeed gone forever. But perhaps from those ashes, something new could emerge, something harder and colder, yes, but also wiser and more purposeful than before. Not healing, exactly, but evolution. Chapter 9, Genesis. 1 year to the day after Damon's abandonment at May's place, a series of events unfolded across the city, each bearing his invisible signature. At State University, the registrar processed a scholarship award for Olivia Crawford, her legal name since the divorce, having abandoned the Westerly surname. The funding came through the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit organization supporting individuals impacted by financial fraud. The scholarship covered full tuition, housing, and a modest living stipend. Olivia, who had been preparing to take out substantial student loans, stared at the notification in disbelief. The award letter specified no conditions beyond maintaining academic standing. It made no reference to her past actions or family connections. It offered opportunity without forgiveness, a distinction that was not lost on her. After confirming the award was legitimate, she sat in her small apartment, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of gratitude or relief, but of complex recognition, understanding that this represented not reconciliation, but a final statement. A door simultaneously opened and permanently closed. Across town, Vanessa received a certified letter from an unknown law firm. Inside was a deed to a modest 3-bedroom house in a respectable neighborhood, along with documentation transferring ownership into a trust established for her infant son, Michael. A separate notice informed her of a position as an administrative assistant at a property management company, a job for which she had not applied, but which matched the limited skills on her recently created resume. The letter contained no personal message, no signature beyond the attorney's. Yet Vanessa understood its meaning as clearly as if Damon had spoken directly. Provision without pardon, responsibility without reconciliation. She held her 6-month-old son, studying his features, Harrington's eyes, her mouth, no trace of the man who had arranged this lifeline despite having every reason to wish them hardship. Michael would grow up with stability and opportunity, despite the circumstances of his conception and the chaos of his early existence. Whether he would ever know the full story of the man who had ensured this outcome was a question for a distant future. At the federal courthouse, the final sentencing in the First Atlanta case concluded with Bradley Summers receiving 25 years for his role in orchestrating the fraud scheme. Damon attended the sentencing, watching impassively as the financial empire that had targeted him and countless others was officially dismantled. District Attorney Reynolds joined him as he exited the courthouse. "Congratulations. Your testimony was instrumental in securing these convictions." The victims' testimonies were what mattered. Damon corrected her. My role was secondary. Either way, it's over. Justice served. Damon nodded, though his expression suggested more complex thoughts. One chapter ends. Others begin. Speaking of which, Reynolds continued, the governor's office contacted me about your victim support initiative. They're interested in implementing it statewide, possibly as a model for national programs. Good. May will coordinate with your office on the details. As they parted ways, Reynolds studied him with professional assessment. You know, Westerly, when this all started, I thought you were just another wealthy man seeking personal vengeance. I was wrong. What you've built from this tragedy, it's genuinely changing lives. Damon accepted the observation with a slight nod before continuing to his waiting car. The final stop that day was one he had not planned but felt increasingly necessary as the hours passed. The rehabilitation center, where he still occasionally received treatment for chronic pain, had recently added a children's wing, funded primarily through his foundation. He walked through the bright corridors, observing young patients working with therapists, their determination evident despite their challenges. In a hydrotherapy room, a girl of about 10 struggled to move her legs in the heated pool, her face a mask of concentration. That's amazing progress, Emma, her therapist encouraged. 3 months ago, you couldn't feel anything below the knees. The girl's frustrated expression gave way to tentative pride. Do you think I'll ever run again? I think you'll do whatever you set your mind to, the therapist answered. The body has limitations. The spirit doesn't. Damon watched from the observation window, something stirring within him that he had thought permanently extinguished. Not hope, exactly. He had moved beyond such simple emotions. Perhaps recognition of potential, the human capacity to rebuild from devastating loss. That evening, he returned to his penthouse for a scheduled meeting with Ray and May. The Phoenix Foundation had expanded dramatically over the past year, requiring more formal governance and strategic planning. The scholarship program has 57 recipients now, May reported, her natural compassion balanced by newly developed executive skills. Retention rate is 94%. We're making a difference. And the victim support network? Damon inquired. Ray took over, operating in 7 cities. We've helped over 300 individuals rebuild after financial predation. The partnership with law enforcement has been particularly effective, catching victims early in the process before they lose everything. The model works, May added. We're getting inquiries from other states, even federal agencies. They want to replicate what we've built. Damon nodded, satisfied. What had begun as an instrument of his personal vengeance had evolved into something larger and more significant, a systemic response to institutional predation. After reviewing operational updates and approving expansion plans, the formal meeting concluded. May departed for another appointment, leaving Damon and Ray alone. 1 year today, Ray observed, pouring himself a small measure of whiskey from Damon's sideboard. Since the diner. Yes. Thinking about it, Damon moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights emerging as dusk fell. I was thinking about what died that day, and what survived. Ray waited, allowing his friend space to continue if he chose. The man who believed in family above all, he died, Damon finally said. The man who trusted without verification, who built his life around others' happiness, he's gone. And what survived? Purpose, clarity, the understanding that betrayal is inevitable but not definitive, that what matters is not what is taken from you, but what you build afterward. Ray studied him thoughtfully. The scholarship for Olivia, the trust for Vanessa's son, the job opportunity. Those weren't acts of a man defined solely by vengeance. They weren't acts of forgiveness either, Damon replied firmly. Merely recognition of responsibility. The choices they made don't erase the commitments I made, even if those commitments were based on lies. Fair enough. Ray set down his glass. And what about your own future? Beyond business, beyond the foundation. Personal connections. Relationships. Damon's expression revealed nothing. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once burned. Some transformations are permanent. Meaning I don't seek what I sought before. Family, trust, conventional connection. Those belong to a different man, a different life. And this life? What does it seek? Damon turned from the window, his face set with quiet determination. Impact. Legacy. Building systems that outlast individuals. Creating something that can't be destroyed by personal betrayal. Rain nodded, understanding that for his friend, this represented not resignation, but evolution. Adaptation to profound injury, resulting in a different but equally purposeful existence. To new beginnings, then, Ray said, raising his glass. Damon acknowledged the toast with a slight nod, though he didn't drink. New beginnings implied hope, expectation, emotional investment, concepts he had systematically excised from his personal psychology. What remained was something more fundamental, the will to build, to create order from chaos, to transform devastating loss into productive purpose. The man who had been abandoned at that roadside diner had indeed died that day. What rose in his place was neither better nor worse, simply different. Harder, clearer, unburdened by illusions about human nature or the permanence of personal bonds. The following morning, Damon reviewed the final plans for his newest project, a comprehensive mixed-use development transforming a neglected urban neighborhood into affordable housing, community facilities, and business incubation spaces. Unlike his previous developments focused primarily on profit, this project prioritized sustainability and community benefit while maintaining economic viability. As he studied the architectural renderings, his phone alerted him to a news update. Pierce Harrington had been transferred to a maximum security federal facility to begin serving his 30-year sentence. The final chapter in the First Atlantic scandal was officially closed. Damon absorbed this information without visible reaction. Harrington's fate, like Vanessa's, like Olivia's, was merely the natural consequence of choices made. Justice, in Damon's view, wasn't an emotional concept but a mathematical one. Actions generating equal and opposite reactions, a perfect balance maintained by natural law rather than human intervention. Later that day, he visited May's place, the roadside diner where everything had changed a year earlier. He had purchased the establishment 6 months ago, renovating it while maintaining its character and retaining the original staff. Though May herself had moved on to her executive role at the foundation, her name remained, honoring the woman whose simple kindness had marked the beginning of Damon's transformation. The lunch crowd was steady, a mix of truckers, local workers, and travelers passing through. Damon took a seat at the counter, ordering coffee from a young waitress who didn't recognize him as the owner. As he sipped the strong black coffee, his gaze fell on the booth where Vanessa and Olivia had delivered their final cruelties before abandoning him. The memory held no pain now, merely historical significance, like visiting the site of an ancient battle long since concluded. The diner's manager, recognizing Damon, approached with respectful deference. "Mr. Westerly, we weren't expecting you today. Is everything satisfactory?" "Everything's fine, Tom. Just passing through." "Anniversary of sorts, isn't it?" the manager asked cautiously, aware of the diner's significance in his employer's history. Damon nodded slightly. "Something like that." After finishing his coffee, Damon left a generous tip and walked to his car. Before departing, he stood for a moment, gazing at the unremarkable building that had become the fulcrum of his existence, the place where one life had ended and another begun. The man who drove away from May's place that day bore little resemblance to either the successful businessman who had built an empire on trust and connection, or the broken, betrayed husband abandoned by those he loved most. What remained was something forged in that crucible of betrayal, harder, colder, more purposeful. Not healed, transformed. As he merged onto the highway, Damon felt neither triumph nor regret for the path he had chosen. The destruction of those who had betrayed him had been necessary, but ultimately secondary to what came after, the creation of something new from the wreckage of what was lost. His phone rang through the car system, Lloyd calling with updates on the new development project. Damon answered, his voice steady and certain as he discussed next steps, future plans, the continuing work of building something that would outlast personal trauma and betrayal. The road stretched before him, leading not back toward what was lost, but forward into what could yet be created. Not a journey of recovery or redemption, but of genesis, the emergence of something entirely new from the ashes of what came before. A man who never forgave, a man who never forgot, a man who refused to be defined by what was taken from him, choosing instead to be measured by what he built in its aftermath. A phoenix, risen not to reclaim what was, but to create what had never been. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.